Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. My name is Don Morrill, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York Technology Council. Welcome to the inaugural event in what we hope will be a interesting and lively series on diversity in technology, kicking off tonight with Women in Technology. Very happy to have our panel and our moderator here tonight. More about them in a couple minutes, but let me start with a couple of quick opening housekeeping remarks. I'd like to give a quick thanks to our 2012 organizational sponsors. We have the accounting firm of Eisner Amper, Google, Power Space and Services, Ernst & Young, Verizon, TGP Associates, Information Builders, J.H. Cohen, IBM, and the law firm of Frankfurt Kernet. And we'd also like to give an extra special thanks tonight to Citrin Cooperman for hosting us in this great space. This is the second time we've worked with Citrin Cooperman, and we really appreciate all of the help that they've given us in hosting some of these events. So thanks to them, and thanks to all of our sponsors. Still plenty of room on our website for logos if anybody's interested in potentially sponsoring the website. That's all I have tonight. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this is the first in what is hopefully going to be a strong diversity event series. I'd like to thank Alice Eng, who's our event and marketing coordinator. This was her idea. She put this panel together. She's done a great job in putting this together, so hopefully we'll have a lot more events like that. And this is all I have. I'm going to turn it over to Nelly now. You all have all the bios and everything in front of you, so I won't go into that, but I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Are you all excited for this really cool panel that we have tonight?
Yes.
Oh, that doesn't sound excited. Sorry. That doesn't sound excited. Are you all excited? Awesome. We're excited, too. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the CTO for Webgrrls International, which is a networking organization for professional women who are in or interested in technology or leverage technology in their professional lives. I'm very close to this topic of getting more women into tech, getting more women into entrepreneurship, and I'm so happy to be a part of this really esteemed panel. And our hope is to share today very broadly what it takes to run a company in New York City as a woman in technology. And before we get started, I just wanted to see, kind of like an informal survey, how many of you are currently entrepreneurs? Good, awesome. How many of you are starting or thinking about jumping to the light side? Huh? The light side instead of the dark side? Where you are now? Good. And so we're going to cover from kind of the beginning stages all the way to raising money, to building your company, and we're going to touch on a lot of different points, hopefully to give you a good overview, with the hopes that in future events we're going to dive into different topics in much more detail, because each one of these topics could be a whole panel in itself. So before we get started, I wanted to very briefly introduce the panelists. We have Veronika right here. She's the founder and CEO of InSpark, a social commerce marketing and technology company. She's also the co-founder of Women in Wireless, a nonprofit that empowers and develops female leaders in mobile and digital media. And Women Innovate Mobile Accelerator, the first accelerator for women-led mobile ventures. Prior to this, Veronika had executive positions at AOL and Jobstart. Thank you. We also have Yin Yin. Yin spent 5 years as a partner at Simonde, a New York-based web design and development agency. She then went on to co-found OnePager, a tool that helps small businesses easily create great-looking websites, and We Are NY Tech, a site that provides diverse individuals within the New York tech community. Next, we have Peggy Wallace. Peggy is the founding member of Golden Seeds and a partner in Golden Seeds. She is also a general partner of all Golden Seeds venture funds. Golden Seeds operates the third largest angel group in the country. Peggy sits on boards of Chromis, Fiber Optics. Sorry, it's a typo. G Diapers, and Honestly Now. And last but not least, we have Nina. Sorry, 1 second. So Nina is the CEO and founder of BluTrumpet, a mobile advertising company. This is her 6th startup, and she was previously the COO of BumpTop, which got acquired by Google 2 years ago. Nina has an engineering degree from the University of Waterloo in Canada and an MBA from Harvard. I am so honored to be in a company of these women. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we start with, where did your ideas come from? How do you know if someone in the audience wants to start a business, wants to start a company? How do you find that idea, and how do you make sure that the idea has legs, that it has marketing? Why don't we start with Veronika and just move down the line?
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'll start off with where our idea came from for InSpark. It actually came from a partner that we were talking to. So we were talking to InSpark is a pivot. So we were doing group messaging, which got to be a very crowded space.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We don't have microphones, and so if you could speak up and project to the back of the room so everybody can hear you, that would be great.
Okay, great. So the current version of InSpark was a pivot from a consumer group messaging business, and we had talked to a major deal company, and we were looking at using deals to monetize our groups, and they're friends of mine from AOL, and I was showing them what we were doing, and they said, look, you're small, and our deals are local, and by the time you hit the scale that it would matter, this conversation is very premature, but we'll look at what you're doing, and we showed them what we had, and they said, we really think there's something interesting here, but not in the way you're thinking about it. We think your technology would be really interesting in powering, our referrals, because we have this offer here, me plus 3 equals free, and we'd like you to power that. And so, at the time we kind of had it in the back of our heads and didn't initially pursue that idea, but then, after a while realized that our space was getting crowded, hard to penetrate, and this was a much more lucrative option, and pivoted. But I think to answer the broader question of how do you find your idea, and maybe more importantly, how do you make sure it's a good idea? The thing that I tell everyone in the companies that are going through our accelerator especially is customer development. It's if there's any class, if you're going to start a company, the first classes I'd say you take are classes on customer development, so you really understand, how do you validate your ideas, right? How do you ensure that you have product market fit? How do you fit in the competitive landscape? Really understanding all of that and making sure that you're solving an important problem that has a real pain point and a real need.
Thank you.
For OnePager, well, we used to be a client services company, and we discovered that there was a lot of potential customers that would come to us and say, we need a really, really basic website with our contact information, and that's about all we want, and we have $50. And obviously we can't accommodate all those requests that come in, and so we decided that, what are the options out there? WordPress, Weebly, they're a little hard to use for somebody that is a very basic computer user, so we decided that, maybe there's a need for a simplified way to build a website. So that's how we came up with OnePager. And I think for a startup like us, it's very important that we enjoy using our app. We have fun using it, and in turn, our customers are going to use it, and they're going to have fun, dragging the content up there, or editing the styles, or the colors and all that stuff. So you make yourself your customer and build something that you would want to use, and then in turn other people would enjoy using it as well.
That's a great point. Thank you. Peggy, maybe if you started companies, to share that.
Well, we started Golden Seeds.
Yeah.
And so Golden Seeds was started from scratch 5 years ago. So I can talk to that in the sense that this was started out of a need to get more women investors into this area. Just last year, angel investors were 12% female, and 2.4% of funding went to companies with a woman in a C-level position. So you can see that there's still a long way to go. I spent the last few days at the Women Corporate Directors Global Institute. Women hold 16% of public board seats. There's a long way to go. Our goal, all we want is half of everything. We want to own half the internet because we use more than half of the internet, and I'm not joking. So Golden Seeds itself is a startup. It's an entrepreneurial organization, but it's actually trying to, and we're trying to show that by investing in diverse teams, so we believe in diversity, in teams that consist of men and women and diverse boards, and we believe, just has been shown in the public markets, that our investments will outperform, and that's what we've set out to prove. Now, at the company level, we've invested in over about 45 companies at this point. We have 16 in our first fund and 10 in our second. And to me, the companies that we see, I feel, are always born, even the very scientific tech ones seem to be born out of a really kind of passionate aha moment. And even if it might be something as geeky as optical fiber, there is a lot of passion, and there's a really, engaging story there. But, even in my 3 boards, G Diapers, which is a consumer product, but it's actually clean tech, because we seek to disrupt the $4 billion industry. There should be no plastic diapers on this planet. I've heard today that in 30 years, our population will go from 7 billion to 9 billion. This is real. The planet is this is a threat. These were people who had their first baby, did not want to explain why his diapers would be on the planet for 500 years. A company was born. Honestly, now, when Teresa Nemashani's mother passed away, she lost both her parents in very rapid succession. As she was dressing for the funeral for her mother, she turned to ask her mother if she looked okay. And she realized that she had lost an honest voice in her life, and she has built an online company out of that. About one, Joanne Lang, who was a senior executive at SAP with 4 boys, was called from school because one of her sons was being rushed to the hospital. When she got there, he was blue, being pulled out on a stretcher, had never been ill in his life. It was his first asthma attack. They were screaming, "What's his blood type?" etc. She was holding her cell phone. She could not remember his name. She was in such a panic. A company was born at that moment because she said, "Why isn't it here?" And she wants to empower us through privacy and bank standards. And really, we have a story like that these women have, and these teams, because I don't want to just say women, because it's men and women in almost all cases. These teams identify a compelling market need. They know that need exists, and they can speak about it very passionately. That resonates with us, and they've often done a very good job at assessing if it really is a need, and you're hearing that echo through the comments.
Excellent. Nina, you started 6 companies, so you got something right. To share with us what makes it an idea important, and how do you make it successful?
Well, I should clarify, I didn't start all of them. I started off the first few where I was just a junior engineer or on the program management side, and then the last few I was at the C level. This is my first time being a CEO, so I sort of transitioned across all parts of startup. The current company that I'm at, BluTrumpet, the idea was born from need, as is sort of a common theme in the answers prior to me, and pivoting. So we knew, and I've been around the block enough to know that, okay, I'm going to start something, and it's going to look like A. By the time the first customer sees it, it'll probably go through iterations B and C. By the time the 10th customer sees it, it'll probably look like, go through iterations D, E, and F. And by the time we become, a $500 million or $1 billion company, we're probably going to be at Z, or even recycling, back across the alphabet. So I think, the idea that an idea is born and becomes $1 billion idea, in 18 months, as we may have seen with Instagram, I think those are the rare stories. I think the more common stories are the Twitter stories, or the Angry Birds stories, where Angry Birds, I think, was the 50-second game for these people. Same group of people, same level of intelligence, same level of creativity, same level of human-computer interaction and design. But it took them their 50-second game or something like that to sort of nail the $1 billion idea. So I think the concept of an idea being sparked out of need is a very important starting point, and then the pivoting around that. And Veronika spoke to that, and I know BluTrumpet's been that, and even bumped up the prior company I was at. So the two of those together, I think, form the idea. And I think what forms the business is the persistence to get through it all. Sort of the persistence to say, hey, this is a great idea, and actually do something about it. How many great ideas have we had over the course of our lives, and we actually haven't done anything with with them, and yet, these other people are doing things with these ideas. The idea of sharing photos, I mean, we've all thought of that, right? And so Instagram nailed it. Or we've all thought about, like connecting to our friends, and Facebook nailed it. And so we all think of these ideas, but the perseverance to do something with them and to make it through the pivots. Veronika and I live this every day, and I'm sure you guys are, Peggy, you're probably seeing it every day in your investments, and Yin Yin, you're probably seeing this every day as well, where, it takes perseverance to take an idea that we've had and a few iterations and keep at it.
So how long do you keep at it? I mean, so there are people who continuously try, and then what do you wait for? Is it revenue, or is revenue important? I mean, sometimes I have to question that, right? Do you want to build a company that has real revenue, and when do you stop? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I'll go first. I think we all know that there's clues out there, and they come from different forms. So revenue is an important form. So even if you get a client that's willing to put $10,000 behind your product, or even a user that's willing to buy it once for $1, those are clues that you're onto something. So revenue, I think, is an important concept, not so much in terms of what the accounting reports say, but more as clues that you're onto something. And the more revenue you have, the more traction and the more proof points you're seeing. Even if it's at the $1 mark, and you just get 100 of those, and you get $100, that's 100 people who've agreed with your idea and have been willing to put some effort behind getting it. So revenue is an important indicator. I don't know if it's an important goal, especially early on, but it's a very important indicator. So that's one clue. Another clue are other forms of engagement. So for BluTrumpet, we're mobile advertising, so a click-through rate is very important to us. That has no dollars behind it, for us, because we have a different pricing model. But it's the first level of engagement, and so we track that very, very, very closely to tell us if we're hitting the mark. So there's clues, and if we're not, then eventually we pivot in time frame, like you were asking. I like to operate on very short time frames, and so every 3 months, should we be pivoting? I think. Some people will say that's too fast. Conversely, I think the idea of pivoting every 3 years, like some of the big companies do, and we notice that they struggle with that, and their numbers and their stock price struggles with that. So that might be, on the opposite side where it's too slow. And I think, for each business and each industry that you're in, the right time, will, may naturally find itself for mobile and mobile advertising. It is 3 months. I think maybe for biotech, I don't know, I'm just thinking this up, maybe it's a year, before you start to pivot. But certainly look for clues, and those clues should come in, on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis.
Veronika, what about you? Do you guys charge for your product? How often
we
do you pivot?
Although right now we're in beta, so we're offering free trials. But I mean, it's funny, we pivot on every 2 weeks, but we're making very small pivots. So we're launching new features. So we learn, because we have an analytics product, we quickly learn what works and doesn't work, and then we make small pivots in our product and tweak it, and then look at the results again. And so we're constantly doing these little teeny pivots with our technology to learn what works better. And then some of them are bigger in some, but. I think you pivot until you get it right, especially if you're getting clues that you're on the right direction. But I think sometimes you can get some early clues without investing a lot. So I always say it's almost like fake it till you make it, but really those are tests. So, create a landing page and see if people who land on the landing page, the marketing message resonates and they sign up. First test, people are interested in the product, they're signing up for something. That's one clue. You can do a lot of things manually, where you can create an interface that looks like it's full technology, and then process results manually, and that gives you clues until you run out of time to do that. If you're not an engineer, development's expensive, so there's a lot of things that you can test without fully developing an entire platform. The last thing you want to do is spend a year developing a platform that you don't know someone needs, or maybe in a year when you have it, it's not going to be needed anymore. So, I always, we work in very light development cycles, and we get things out there, quickly test them. Some things we retire, some things we keep going, and then build them in a more robust way when they're, on the verge of breaking. But it really helps you learn a lot. And I would say this, kind of lean startup is the term that people use for it. I think that's really, really important these days, because things change so fast.
For those of you who don't know who are not familiar with the Lean Startup movement, you should read Eric Ries's book called The Lean Startup, or Four Steps to the Epiphany. It's a must-read book for every entrepreneur, I feel like. If you guys agree, it's an amazing way of developing products without having to spend a lot of money in it, especially in tech.
I think technology lets you do the lean startup today, and that's definitely an avenue to consider. We like to see companies, though, that have a revenue model. We know it might be completely wrong and completely outlandish, and that you may end up doing something very different, but we want to be dealing with entrepreneurs who have the mindset that they're building a business. So that's really important to us, and we may all be laughing like hyenas one day, and we're like, we thought we'd make money doing that, and we're doing something totally different. But we really want that mindset. These are businesses, and you have to see something, revenue, use. You have to get some kind of evidence that it's of interest to these people that you thought you were serving their need. And I think the word pivot used to be market tests. You're constantly, we're looking for people who know how to be constantly testing their markets and adjusting. To me, a pivot is kind of it's more of a business model shift, or I think it is a little bit of a bigger thing.
Peggy, when you look for companies, so you said that you want to have a revenue model built into it. Do you have to have revenue making money before you guys invest? Or
No, we will do pre-revenue, so we're kind of across it because we have an angel group and a fund that work together. The angels can go in very early, and we did a number of pre-revenue deals in New York City, like Bespoke Global and Honestly Now and Gracious LOEs might be some that some of you have heard of. So we will go in early, and so the angels might help a company get started, and then we call those pipelines, because we feel that then when they need more capital, they can come back, and then the fund might get involved. When the fund's involved, it's usually $1 million to $2 million type raise. But at those raises, then we're probably, it depends, because we do some really heavy tech. For example, we have a company called Crimson Hexagon, which is a big data play that we did at the time that when people were talking about Twitter, we did Crimson Hexagon. And it's really interesting because I think this is why people should watch what Golden Seeds is doing, because I think we were sitting, because it's men who usually adopted Twitter, and I think at that time you're like, would we go on this thing? And it was a bunch of VCs, you were doing it, but would we use this thing? But we knew it was going to be data. And so if you came out of Wall Street, we were like, well, that's going to be a lot of market information. It was developed for political sentiment, so we knew it was developed. It really captured sentiment for political elections. And our women who are marketers came deeply out of retail and marketing. People think they're about fashion. They're not. Those are the most data and analytical people you'll ever meet. So where are we today? Well, as Twitter and all these things are converging, they're just babbles. It's just information. And our thing tells you what they're saying, truly tells you the sentiment. And so that's where we've converged. And I think that a lot of our investments kind of show a different way of looking at things. And there was no revenue when we did Crimson. Okay. We feel we understood it, but heavily patented situation, but a lot of people didn't understand it.
That's interesting. By the way, if any of you have questions, you can tweet them, and then we'll also take some questions at the end. So we'll talk for about an hour, and then I saw somebody raising their hand, so I'm not ignoring you. We're going to take questions at the end. All right. Yin, can you share your revenue model, and did you focus on users first, or did you start charging off the bat?
Well, when we started OnePager, we knew that we wanted to be a subscription based.
Do you have a freemium model?
We do. We have a free version that with limited features, and you could upgrade to a monthly plan and a yearly plan, and you'll have access to the advanced set of features that paid users get. But I wanted to touch on what Veronika said about iteration, and that's something that we do a lot at OnePager, and because we are all we have our designer is a co-founder, and I'm one of the technical co-founders, and we do a lot of iterations quickly, and we test very quickly so that we can get the stuff out and get the information. Yes, you don't want to linger on will this work, will this not work, just test immediately. For instance, we wanted to see if people were interested in having more than one page website. So we put a little button that said add more pages, and then we just tracked if how many people clicked on it, instead of building out this whole thing that was a multi-pager manager.
That's great. Yes. That's a great And what do you think? Do you think that being a developer helps you in running a company?
Oh yeah, definitely. It saves you money from having to hire another company, first of all, and you get to do things very fast. Once you come up with a new feature set, throw it together, and then you could release it. Well, don't throw it together, but think through it, and then build it, and then put it up. And that's definitely very good for a startup, because you don't want to waste time waiting for somebody else to build it, and then a month goes by and you don't have this feature yet.
And Nina, you also come from a technical background. Has being a techie helped you run your businesses and make them successful?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the piece that it provides for me is confidence when I talk to technical people. I can't code any longer, but I did code for when I was in university and for a few years after. The world has changed so much that I honestly couldn't even if I tried right now. But I know enough about the basics to have a dialogue, to understand scope. And it's funny because most people would think it's because then people can't pull the wool over my eyes, but it's actually not about that. It's more about me being able to relate to that important piece of our business. So BluTrumpet right now is 7 people, and 5 of them are engineers or program managers. So it gives me the ability to relate to them, and them the ability to relate to me. So it really helps in that connection. I can't say that I'm a strong contributor in that sense. But it does allow that connection to happen, and then people to come to me and for me to come to them with more fine-tuned questions. But for folks that aren't engineers by training, I think there's a lot that you can pick up along the way. So a lot of what I know now, I would say maybe 60-70% of what I know now that I use for relating to the tech side of things is stuff I picked up along the way. The first 30% sure that was university. But even folks without the engineering degrees or without the CS degrees, take some time and read up on just stuff going on, understand what HTML5 means versus HTML4, and just sort of the high level stuff, and sort of tune into that. And people without engineering degrees can do it.
Very cool. What about you, Veronika? What is it like for you to, as a non-techie, what is it like for you to run a technology company?
I've become very technical. It's I have a minor in mathematics, so I generally understand, the concepts. I just don't know how to code. So I'll make people put it on the board. But I had to learn. I think for me, I would say the product side was much harder to learn. Once you learn the product side, then it's just asking the right questions. So what is the quickest way we can build this feature? At what point does it break? Is there alternative ways? Can you diagram how you're going to put this together? Not from a product perspective, from a technical perspective. So I think if you can ask, good questions and really understand, not be like, oh, that's a tech side, I'm not going to touch it, but really understand it and understand the decisions they're making and the time trade-offs and the technology trade-offs, then you can really do anything. The hardest thing for me was figuring out how to project manage. That was the biggest challenge.
Oh yeah, thank you. So now I kind of want to shift things a little bit and talk about leadership. We know how important it is for the change in technology to happen, for the change in women in technology, and women is to become better leaders, is to take on more senior positions, is to start companies. What are you guys' thoughts on 3 things that every one of us can do today to become better leaders? Nina, you can start, or Veronika, you can start. I want to hear all of your thoughts because we need as much help as we can get.
I'm going to make this up as I go, but the first thing that popped into my mind was listen more. And one of the things that we think as leaders is that we have to then take charge and tell people what to do. But really, a leader is listening to what's going on, making fast decisions, and then communicating that concisely. And so, if you bring all that together, a leader's probably listening 60% of the time, and thinking or talking the other 40%. So that's one thing. The second thing. Is to be able to make fast decisions. One of the things I've learned is, as I've moved throughout the startups, is it's very easy to say, oh, well, we should do this or we should do that. But then actually making the call to do it is a very different skill set. And that's one of the, this is my first time being the CEO. I've been the COO 3 times in my past. And I thought it would just be sort of like a nomenclature difference to be the CEO. It's actually not. I'm learning a lot of the subtleties between those two, and one may think that they're so similar. And one of the biggest things is the ability to make decisions, and make them quickly. So as a leader, I'm learning a lot about that, even this far down in my career. So that's a second thing. Let's see, a third thing that would make a leader. That would help with a leader. Maybe I'll come back because I don't want to just say something random for the sake of it.
Think about it. Give us something good.
Okay.
So I'm happy to add. So I would say, especially if you're taking any job, a CEO or founder of a company is just one job, but really any job, if it's new and different than what you've done, or even if it's what you've done before but you want to do better. Like I'm a big fan of mentors. I have lots of mentors. So and even before we started in Spark, we created this pretty robust advisory board of all the different types of skills that I felt like I was missing. So I have like 2 CEO mentors, one of which has, raised money and funded a company through Series D. He was my CEO at JumpTap, and I've never raised money until recently. So there's so much that I had to learn about that process, and he's been critical. I call him every time, I get stuck. So I think mentors are incredibly important. And if you don't have the network yourself, there's also, we run an accelerator program with Women Innovate Mobile. Part of the benefit of joining an accelerator is the accelerator provides you with mentors, and that is one of the biggest benefits of programs like ours. So mentors, I'd say, is one. Then the other thing, I guess, in terms of being a leader, I think I'd echo Nina's sentiment in terms of listening, but I also think one of the things you'll have to learn, especially like the higher you go, is you have to figure out how, a lot of times you're doing things that have never been done before, or you're doing things that you may have not done before, and if you can't necessarily get the question answered, like learn how to teach yourself new things. I always say, there's so much I had to learn about technology before managing a technology company, so just really get comfortable, teaching yourself, not having to raise your hand and say, how do I do this? Because there's not always someone to answer that.
I'll take it. Yeah. So women have different leadership styles. There's a new Harvard study out, 360 review, and women are scoring higher on all qualities of leadership. But women have different ways, and the reason is they're more collaborative, more team, do a little bit more listening, take their role model positions very seriously. So there's a lot of very documented stuff about it. So sometimes the reason women feel uncomfortable as leaders is because your style is different than the typical role model, and so it can erode your confidence. I heard the new female CEO of Campbell Soup speak today. Took her 8 months to click into the role of CEO. She'd previously run billion-dollar divisions. So she was speaking about that a little bit today at that moment. And so what does a great leader do? They have to lead people. And actually, a lot of what leaders do is about process, because you have to build a company or an organization that allows people who are very different from you often. You can't always hire somebody just like you. If a company's going to scale, eventually, it can't just be people like you with your educational background, blah, blah, blah. You have to hire people at all kinds of levels, and you have to build an organization that allows them to work at their highest potential. And a lot of it's really boring, blocking and tackling and process. And the greatest leaders I know are obsessed with process. And if you see something not working, you have to fix it. If somebody's not at their full potential, that's your leadership failure. So you really have to be a student of leadership. And we have a lot of leaders in our organization. And one piece of advice I heard that I thought was really excellent was we have an investor member. And in this case, it's a male who had started a company from scratch. He grew it to several $1 billion. And at every step of the way, because by the way, you may not be a leader, you may not want to lead a large company, you might want to end it after a certain point, and then you should fire yourself and bring in the leader to take the company to the next stage. But this person's example was that he ran a company out of the back of his car, then he ran a company at $10 million in revenue, and then he said, well, what do I have to do to run a company that's $100 million in revenue? What skills do I have to do that? When he got to $100 million, he said, what skills do I need to run a $500 million company? when he got there, what skills do I need to run a public company? So leadership, you study it and you surround yourself with leaders, but always remember it's about leading people and letting them real work to their fullest potential and setting up an organization that allows that to happen.
That's a great point. Yin, do you have anything to add?
Well, I agree with what everybody said up here.
That's very hard to top.
Yeah, definitely have an understanding of, the people that you are leading and listen to them and, be able to understand all the point of views. And
what about the importance of co-founders? So that's something that you, as a leader, can you offset and decide that what your position would be within the company and give off that leadership role to someone else if you are not a good leader? Or what do you guys recommend to continue to become a leader, even though you might think that you're not ready at the moment to lead the team, or find someone to found the company with you who is a better leader?
Well, we believe, we're seeking new corporate cultures and new corporate paradigms. That's not going to be played out in our venture portfolio. That'll be played out in our private equity. But we believe that some of these jobs have become too big for one person anyway, at all levels. So we are actually big fans of co-leadership, possibly even 3. So, and you see that a lot in these companies. And we think even at very, very large companies, to us, it would make a lot of sense to maybe have co-CEOs of large companies. So we're very comfortable with it as a concept and as a corporate experiment. And but I do think we see in this tech world, because New York, I've read recently, has twice as many female CEOs as Silicon Valley and London. Yeah. And what we're hearing out of Silicon Valley is that if a woman starts a company, she's being required to bring in a tech co-founder. That's not a requirement that we impose. We think that the co-founder could have different skill sets, and maybe the tech is hired. So we're not forcing anything like that. But we definitely see a lot of co-leadership in these companies, and it can make or break.
Right.
There's no easy answer. Everything's its own situation.
Well, you all have co-founders, right?
Yeah, I would highly. I really value having a co-founder, and because it's just someone that is as committed. I have 2 co-founders, as committed to your business as you are, and that you can bounce ideas off of and really kind of collaborate with. I think I'm really I'm happy to give half my equity away for someone who adds that kind of value. It's it's worth it, totally worth it. And it was we kind of found the idea together. I personally found it with, and we brought in a 3rd co-founder. But there's different ways that people mature their leadership. So. The Google co-founders notoriously brought in Eric Schmidt, and then when they kind of felt like they matured as leaders, he left, and Larry stepped in. Just recently, David Karp took over Tumblr. He founded it. He brought in, I think it's John Maloney to run it, and then now John's leaving. But then you have Mark Zuckerberg, who brought in Sheryl Sandberg, and she was more the COO. So there's different models out there for really successful companies. In some cases, the people who were more inexperienced leaders gave up the leadership position so that someone else took it, and then they stepped into it later. In other cases, they kept the leadership position but brought in a more experienced operations person to help run the company. And you have to really look at yourself and what is the right structure for you. They're all viable models.
Yin, what about you? What you guys have co-founders also, right?
Yeah, there's actually 4 of us, which is a crowd, I guess, at times. But it's definitely very helpful to have, these people that you can talk to and you could bounce ideas off of, and, because if you were by yourself, you might have this concept that's just brewing in your head, and it's not necessarily a good idea, and you need somebody to tell you that. And, if you have co-founders, then they'll be able to tell you that that's stupid, and and
they'll be honest.
Yeah, they will. They'll have to be honest because they're attached to the company and they want it to be successful as well. So,
Nina, do you want to add something?
The only thing I would add is I think that because there's different models, one might find themselves in the same company experimenting with different models. So I've seen, I actually haven't experienced this myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did, in my future endeavors. I've seen many scenarios where there are co-founders and one gets kicked out, or somehow dropped, whatever the dynamic is, or
Well, the
or-
Foursquare example, right? So are you guys all familiar with Foursquare? And one of the founders, they raised a whole bunch of money. One of the original founders was kicked out because of the investors just decided that he wasn't valuable enough anymore, and he had to leave.
So I think one thing is we all think about, is a co-founder or whatever sort of joint structure, be it, a really good COO or something like that, is to not think that that's going to be a final decision. Go with it, commit to it, and then if it's not working, find another model. And Zuckerberg, got rid of Eduardo and eventually brought in Sheryl Sandberg, and then, that worked for him. It causes drama, so we should all just brace ourselves for that, but it might be a necessary process.
And it is more complex when you have as many as 4. I mean, early on, you're going to have to start. You should probably talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities, because at some point, if you raise capital, somebody's going to have to be the CEO. Somebody's going to have to be the CEO. Titles will get assigned at some point. So it can seem very fun and everything, but the rubber really will meet the road. And the earlier you start, I think it's good earlier to maybe surface some of those conversations. What are we going to say when they say who's the CEO? And how are we going to make that decision? And what are they going to say when they say who's the CTO? Because it may happen if you want to take in money. So they do get lots of tough things happen.
That's a great segue into raising money. So we're going to talk about raising money and bootstrapping, all of that. What was it?
Can I ask a question?
I was just going to say, so we're almost at the end. This is going to be the last segment. I just wanted to make sure that you guys prepared your questions. So we'll probably be taking questions in about 5 minutes. All right? So what do you guys think? Bootstrap or raise money, or should you start with bootstrapping, and when should you raise money? Any thoughts, recommendations for all the people who want to start a company and thinking about funding it? What are some of the successful ways that you've implemented, either in your business or you would recommend?
I mean, there's kind of models for everything. I think there's a...
Well, tell us what you have done first.
So we bootstrapped it at first. So we bootstrapped it to a full product. And we actually funded the company ourselves. So my partner and I put in our initial seed capital and, got it to a full product, and then raised money right before we launched it. So we raised money from angels. And I think, people raise at different points, and it all depends on, your idea, your access to capital, your, investors want to, your first set of investors are really going to be people who invest in you, so people who know you. It's like, I think, Peggy, it was your chart, if I recall, that was saying that, earlier on people are investing in you, and later on people are investing in the idea. So it's going to somewhat depend on you and your ability to execute and prove that you're going after a big enough market, and at what point you have enough traction points that you can kind of validate and then raise money. So it really depends. Most companies these days, though, have at least a prototype. I think that I would say that would be probably the minimally viable requirement.
Yin, what did you guys do?
So when we started, we were still making money from client services, and that's how we were able to kind of build OnePager, get it to launch without having any funding. And after it launched, maybe a couple months into it, we did get angel investment to
Why did you guys decide to raise money? What was the reason for it?
We're trying to move away from doing client services, and we wanted a little buffer time between after we launch to when we're profitable. So we're trying to kind of take care of ourselves at that time.
What about you, Peggy? What do you recommend people do?
I think it's really case specific. So I think when you're raising money, you should have a reason, a use of proceeds. Why are you raising the money? And what's involved there. And so what are you building? Are you building something that's going to be has some exit potential? Do you have some concept of the magnitude? We kind of perform that evaluation when it comes to us. But the leaner you can keep it, at least at the beginning, in many cases, will benefit you long term. But there are definitely situations that require a lot of capital, and so you and the investors have to kind of figure that out. But the more capital you take in from outside people, it's sort of a leveraged situation in terms of then how big the exit has to be for there to be a financial return. And so when you read these stories about somebody, they just took in 20 million or 50 million, I think sometimes you should actually feel sorry for them, because they have just put such a burden on how big that exit would have to be. Let's say you take in 20 million, so when you read some of these stories, it's like, oh, so-and-so just took in 20 million. Well, maybe the investor wants 10 times their money, maybe 5, but, they're hoping for 5 to 10 times. So let's be really optimistic. On 20 million, they want to make $200 million on that investment. And what if they bought a third of the company? Or let's be generous, a half of the company, which is very unlikely. You'd have to sell the company for $400 million. For that 20 million to produce 200 million. So you have to think of the leverage effect of how much capital you take in. So the lighter the capital is, the better off your own wealth creation is going to be for yourself. But again, there are companies that need, a lot of money to really scale. So, and sometimes that's at the time. But always know what you're going to do with the money and think really carefully about it, because it's a percentage game, and dilution is expensive to all parties.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's actually two questions of when to raise money, and then the second question is then how much. So on when or if to raise money, I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and I've also been through a lot of bumps and stuff in the startup world, and economically you're better off owning the whole thing, of course, and then as you bring in money, you get diluted down, and your team gets diluted down, and that has an impact as well. But I'm a traditionalist. I'm like, if you can raise money, go do it. You're going to have so many headaches. Getting the financial burden slightly alleviated or all out gone. It's just going to make your life easier. So I'm sort of practical from that perspective. And so that sort of answers the question of when or if. And that is yes, do it. And the second is as soon as it makes sense. And I think that might be different from what other folks on the panel are saying, because I know there's a big movement on delaying financing as long as possible so you can build as much value for yourself as possible, and I totally get that. I've just been around the block enough to know that creates a lot of work and anxiety. And then the second question is how much, and I agree with Peggy here. Raise a little bit. Maybe think of how much you need, and then take a 25% haircut. So if you want to raise, if you think you need $1 million, just go out and raise $750. For one thing, it'll be easier, and another thing, it'll force you to maintain a lean aspect. If you want to raise $3 million, raise $2 million, or something like that, because the more you raise, like Peggy was saying, the bigger the exit needs to be, and then also the more people pay attention and really care, and so the more influence you have from your VCs, and sometimes that influence is a bit of a burden. So in Bump Top, for example, the company I was at prior to BluTrumpet, we had just done a seed round. And looking at Peggy's math, we were able to have a fantastic exit for everyone. It was a small to mid-size exit, in the grand scheme of things. But we could do it, and it worked for everyone. If we were contemplating raising another round, and if we had raised another round, we would have needed at least a 10x number on what we had actually been able to sell the company for, and that would have delayed that exit by 2-3 years, and then added all the risk that time creates. So yeah, I'm a fan of raising, but raising little.
That's good points. So the last question I'll ask before we open it up is, being a woman, being an entrepreneur, being in New York City, what are some of the challenges, some of the resources that you would recommend for people who need mentorship, need just advice, or anything else that you can think of to any one of us? Anyone can go.
I mean, I'm happy to raise my hand since I have. So Women Innovate Mobile is an accelerator. So if you're thinking about startup in the mobile space, we would recommend you apply. Our first class is about a third of the way through now. So we'll be doing another class. We'll be doing 2 classes a year. So that is one resource available specifically. Men can also be part of it, but we're looking for diversity, so at least one female founder. Women in Wireless is also another channel if you're in the mobile space, just to meet other people who are in the mobile technology space. So those are 2 resources. But there's a million. There's Girls in Tech. There's Change the Ratio. I think
Women 2.0.
Women 2.0. Yeah. There's so many resources for women these
Fridays.
days. I think we have and Golden Seas does a lot of men.
We've started something called office hours. So this is before you screen. So it's a way to come in and meet. Like usually, I think you meet 2 angels, and you can get. I think it's a 10 or 15-minute slot, and we're going to start doing these regularly. We haven't published the schedule on our website yet, but we've done it twice, and so it gives you a chance to come in and meet with 2 angels, and get a sense of, should I screen, or some ideas of where to go. So we think that's going to be a really helpful communication tool to you. And I always say, try to go hear anybody pitch that you can. Hear other entrepreneurs pitch. You can watch them on the internet, because you have to get used to that and get a sense of what we're hearing, what's out there, and what are you able to make a pitch like that? It's really good. So any pitch contest you can go to, but this is such a great community, I think, for female entrepreneurs. I am really proud of what's happening in New York, because it was just a great moment for me, because you could kind of sense it. Because we're in Boston, New York, and San Fran, but there are so many women starting great companies in New York City, and that I think we are becoming the center for these companies. And they have tech in them, but they're being driven. It's like marketing women, and they have really unique ideas, and then they're using the tech in different ways, and starting with the user experience. So, and they're really pushy, and they're going to get funded. That's how they're in your face, and you're like, you're going to fund me. So I like that about it too. There's just a real camaraderie now. So I think it's a great city to be a woman entrepreneur.
That's great. Anyone else comments, or we're good?
Well, just want to say that on We're NY Tech, we have a very controversial female filter. So if you're ever looking for, like a female person in the tech community to speak to, if their product relates to your product, you could go to our site, and kind of their contact information is on there and all that stuff.
And submit yourself there too.
And submit What's that?
Why is it
Because you really can't say to do a filter for men versus women. That's not a.
Well, yeah, we don't have a filter for men.
So, and then just to mention for all of you, Webgrrls, I'm going to be doing an event in September called Tech Speak for Entrepreneurs, where I'm going to be teaching everything Veronika mentioned for people who don't know, everything you need to know about technology and running the technology side of your business. So if you're interested in that, come and talk to me. So now we're going to open it up to questions, finally. Yes, here.
So I want to go back to partnerships or co-founders. What do you look for in a co-founder? I mean, I started a business, I started on my own, I have a friend, but you don't necessarily bring your friend in. So what is it you're really looking for in a co-founder? Or what should you be aware of or beware of in a co-founder?
I would look for someone ideally with that has complementary skills, and someone that you want to work with. So you don't want 2 marketing people founding a company. That's probably not a good complement. Ideally, you want people who have different skills. So a lot of times, like the classic pairing, I feel like is like a marketing or a biz dev person and a tech person. That's very common in tech companies, but it doesn't have to be. It could be operations person, it could be a marketing person, whatever the combination is. So you should be bringing different things to the table. You should be able to work together. You're going to work together really closely and really intensely, and it's no matter what, even if it looks like it's an out of the park success, like Pinterest, there's a history before it, and it's not always up. So you want someone that can really kind of be there regardless of whether it's great at that moment or not. And so you want to enjoy spending time with them as well.
Anyone else want to pitch in?
Yeah, I would say I'm actually not a fan of co-founding something with a friend. I think your co-founder should become your friend, and that there should be that dynamic and that chemistry that builds over time. But bringing your friend on, I think some of the hard conversations, building a business is not always agreeing and making money on day one. So there's a lot of hard conversations. And in one of my prior companies, I was sort of the number 2, and the number 1 was a friend. And even as the number 2, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was. We were too good friends to become good colleagues. That said, co-founders should over time absolutely become friends, and maybe even excellent friends, or so far as to say when you're best friends over time. But the relationships should start business.
Great. Anyone else? Over here?
Oh, well, I have another.
Next question. Yep,
Yeah.
next question. And then we'll go in the back there.
Really enjoyed the panel. This has been really great. My name's Heather. I'm a corporate and technology lawyer in Midtown. And my question, I think, is just for Veronika and Nina. I noticed that you both have MBAs, so I don't know if anyone does, and it's not on the paper. And I'm just wondering what prompted you to decide that an MBA would make sense for you, and whether you would advise other entrepreneurs to do them, and at what point in their careers you think it's most valuable for a tech entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, what prompted me to do it was the tech crash of the early 2000s. I needed out, and so I started to apply to schools. Had it not been for the tech crash, to be honest, I don't know if I would have done it. So that's what prompted me. I loved it.
Has it helped you in business?
It certainly has. So after my MBA at Harvard, I went to do 3 years of investment banking at Merrill Lynch, and that's sort of a transition that's made easier with an MBA. And then went back into the tech startups after my 3 years at Merrill. And I am using a lot of those skills that I learned at both my MBA and Merrill Lynch. In fact, I was much better suited to help BluTrumpet get acquired by Google 2 years ago, and I think that was all from that skill set. But like anything, you use what you have, so that's what I have, and so I was able to use it. Minus that, would I have done as good a job? Probably not so much on that vector, but on other vectors, I would have filled the gap. So in terms of whether it's useful, I'm curious to see what Veronika's going to say, because to be honest, it's debatable. I mean, I have one, and I see people that don't have one, and I don't know if I'm any better suited. In fact, sometimes I think I'm a little worse suited, because one of the things. So I wanted to start my own company, and I did start BluTrumpet. But in the process, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to start. My entrepreneurial mind is like, oh my God, I could do anything. These are all, I have tons of great ideas. Everyone's going to love them. And then my MBA hat came on, and I'm like, nope, that's not going to work because of this risk reason, or that doesn't make sense because there's 5 other people doing it. And, I mean, I could cut down every single idea I had because of that MBA, and I think that that doesn't work so well in the entrepreneurial world. So I don't know. I don't know yet.
What do you think, Veronika?
I would say no. I mean, honestly, to be clear, and I say this now. Is it valuable? Yes. 2 of my investors are one of them was a professor and one was a colleague. I'm very close to my business school friends, but I was valuable for the network more than the education. I've learned more being the CEO of a company than anything I've learned in any school or anything, because you're just trial by fire. You're thrown in, and problems come at you, and you got to figure them out. And there's nothing better than kind of real world experience to figure them out. It doesn't hurt, and it definitely helps, but it's 2 years and a lot of money. And I generally, if you want to run your own business, you don't need credentials.
Thank you. I love that. Question in the back, or
yes.
Yes.
I have a question about rewarding employees and teams, and how do you go about thinking through that process and designing a structure that works and is mutually beneficial both to the founders and the investors, as well as to the team members?
And with that question, we also had a question that came in through Twitter. It's similar. When is the size or scale of your company when it's time to hire a seasoned CFO? So it's a hiring question. So just answer that as well if you have experience with that.
Go ahead. I don't know. I'm happy. So in terms of rewarding employees, I mean, there's a few things. First, you want to hire people who are great at what they do and are passionate about the area you're working with, because then I always think things work if there's an overlap. Even when people work with us on Women in Wireless, if they're joining the fundraising committee, I'm like, what are your goals? Because if your personal goals and your interests are aligned with the job, you're going to have a lot of intrinsic motivation in what you're doing. So I think good alignment is the best reward, right? I believe in giving employees equity stock options. I think it's great for people to feel like the success of they're tied to the success of the company. And then honestly, when people do a good job, acknowledge them. It's, it doesn't have to be with money. Sometimes it's just public acknowledgement is really valuable. Anyone else before we take another question? Okay. What about a CFO question? Any thoughts on that? When is the right time to hire a CFO? Anyone?
I mean, it's pretty late. Our companies are able to get by. Well, it depends on what the management brings to it, but you can usually get, kind of an outsourced CFO situation or accounting services. So typically it's when the company is revenuing. If a company has inventory or some complexity to it, that could change it. If it's complicated, but some of these companies are pretty simple, even when they're revenuing.
If anybody needs an outsourced CFO, go to Small Business CFO. Jonathan Ankney works with us at Webgrrls, and he's just amazing. So I can recommend him very highly.
And I would say a COO is probably maybe the first hire before the CFO at a startup.
Great. Anyone else? Question?
Yes, I mean, this is from my perspective. I'm an intellectual property attorney, patent as well. You haven't mentioned it, and from my perspective, I think it's important. So can you speak to it?
Well, I mentioned it in one
Just
of our
in passing,
investments, but
right.
we have many companies that are commercializations of very serious academic patents. So we have, my Chromis Fiber Optics, we have 20 issued patents. So there's a lot of that in our portfolio. We also do life sciences. So, and if there's IP, it makes the company much more interesting to an investor. A lot of the companies that are being built today aren't really, are really first to market, low barrier to entry, that kind of thing. But I think it's definitely gets your attention when there is something there that they were able to protect. And we have many of those in our portfolio.
Great, thank you. There was a question in the back right there. Yep, you.
Oh, me?
Yep.
It's interesting. I'm a commercial real estate broker and deal a lot in the startup world, and I'm dealing with one startup right now. And what's interesting is finding space in New York takes a long time. And one of the dilemmas that she's facing is she's not getting her funding soon enough to properly give her the time to engage the market. I'm just wondering if any of you could speak to that. Did you see that as an issue? I mean, she literally has like 2 months to do it. It's like nearly impossible. So we're constantly.
Well, how many people is it?
She's got 28 and growing quickly. So and I'm like, well, hopefully the next time when we're hopefully going to get something, but it's kind of like we have to have Plan B, Plan C, and you need time. And I think it's startup community, they don't understand how complicated it is and how long it takes, and she said it's driven by her funding. She's not really sure, so she didn't have the luxury of going out.
Well, she got pretty big. And 28 employees is a lot of employees.
Yeah, she's growing. She's at 14 now and hiring, a lot in the next six months. So she's got to get out of her space. She's just, and her lease is up.
What about the loose cubes? I mean, there are these temporary
co-working spaces. There's a ton of them in New York. She needs bigger.
It doesn't work. They're loud. They want their privacy. I mean, we're coming across.
There is actually
the hatchery has new space.
There's this a woman from Webgrrls. I can put you in contact with her. She went from a cubicle where she was in a co-working space and it was again too loud. So she actually rented a room that was for rent, and it was just a little bit more expensive than a cubicle, but she has privacy, and it's just like literally $100 or $200 more a month than she was paying for the cubicle. And so there's other solutions that are rent a room kind of thing in New York City. I can put you in touch with her.
5,000 square feet. It's like big,
I'm sure they could probably accommodate.
It's called the hatchery.
Well, there's a hatchery.
The hatchery
is a separate one.
has new space. I haven't seen it, but they're in Midtown. They have that would be more co-sharing. I don't know what the setup is, but I know they have space available.
Just, we've done a big study, and to me, it's a dilemma that they're facing.
Can people work from home?
What the lead time is for funding.
We're going to take that off, meaning off for discussion, because there's lots of questions, and I can put you in touch with her. And do you guys have any thoughts and ideas?
I would just say there's just one of many types of things that come up in the startup world. Like you have to make last minute decisions, and you can't plan for funding because you don't know how much you're going to get or if it's going to go through, and then you don't want to get your team all riled up for funding at X dollars but come in at Y dollars, which is less. There's a morale effect. So you can't even talk about it or plan for it that much in advance. So unfortunately for service providers in this space, it's just a stop and go kind of business. I mean, I don't know if there's even a good solution for it except just persisting through it. I don't know.
But a growing company space is always a big issue. When companies really grow, But the question is she growing or scaling? They're very different things. So if she's growing that fast, but worried about the money that, she might want to look at her projections and her budgets.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Anyone? Yes.
First, I just want to thank the panel for being so generous with your knowledge and your time. My question is to the panel in general. From your personal experience, what was the biggest obstacle that you have had to face, in the startup phase, and what did you learn from the experience?
For me, the biggest obstacle was, we talked a little bit before, shifting and growing a skill set. So I come from a technology and sort of product perspective, and that got BluTrumpet through the first 8 months perfectly. And then the last 8 months, we've been around for 16 months now, the last 8 months has been around getting that product into customers' hands and actually closing them. So it's a whole sales side of things. And I've done it many times before, so I didn't fully appreciate that my skills were just sort of at a crude level, and they needed to get much better fine-tuned. So that's the biggest challenge I face, that I was hit with this, like a Mack truck hitting me, and so I had to scramble to figure it out and do it in a way that made sense to me. Product folks typically have a hard time selling because product folks want the product to stand on its own. That's why we put so much energy into the product. It should be clear, and selling is all about speaking and talking and sort of convincing people, and then that's an extra step. And so I had to figure out how to do it my way that made sense for me and my personality and what I was good at. I like numbers, so I would start to use numbers in my selling, and that worked nicely because then I could rely on the numbers to sell themselves. And so that was one of the biggest challenges I faced, and that was actually because BluTrumpet's such a small company, we're 7 people, and I'm the CEO. That was actually a challenge that the company faced because of that.
I'll just say for our companies, it's always marketing. So they're good at they think they have an employee, they're good at building products and those comfort zone things. But the hardest thing sometimes is understanding who your customer is and actually selling something. And that's where these companies, that's always the weak point when you get to that stage. And then really understanding how to sell something and doing it.
Yin Yin, do you have any thoughts?
We're actually at this point where we've realized that is where we need our strength is in sales, and we're starting to gather a bunch of partnerships because we don't have a strong sales force, and we don't have we're a product team, so we need to get what Nina said. We need to get our sales strengths up.
It's funny. I think I have the exact opposite problem. So I've been doing biz dev and sales my entire career. So I think that's easy. That's what I like to do. It's I do product half the time, and it's I can't wait to hire someone to do that part of it. But that was what was hardest for me. I like it now, but it was definitely a challenge. Learning how to manage engineering and how to ask the right questions and how to do the right customer development, and knowing that everything takes longer than whatever projections your engineers ever give you, and it's just in managing that was incredibly hard. I think because when I was at AOL, we had strategy people that we dealt with, and they dealt with product people who dealt with engineers. That's how far away they were from my role. And then at JumpTap, they were closer. We were in the same kind of area, but I never really worked with engineers. And it's great that you're teaching this class because it takes something to learn how to ask the questions to make sure that you're building the right product with the right amount of effort against it, and really being able to manage both the product and the engineering resources effectively. I think that was the biggest challenge.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Yes.
I have a question for Peggy. Would golden seeds ever invest into a startup where both co-founders are not working on it full-time, meaning that they have either part-time or full-time jobs that let them continue?
No, when our money comes in, we might be the catalyst for you to go full-time, but we would not do that. And, that if you're not willing to take the risk, we're not your friends or your family. So if you're not willing to take the risk, we might become that, as you heard, but, we're friendly, but we're not your friends. So, and that has been a non-starter, and we've also seen situations where 2 people might purport to be co-founders, and one wants to continue working, and then what you have is equal ownership and unequal partnership. and that doesn't really work either. So there's got to be, there's got to be a commitment. So that would mean you're probably not quite ready for us. There might be other investors who would, but it would not work for us.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question. In terms of equity give-ups, is there a good resource or book that you could, look for if you're a startup and you kind of want to know what the norm is in terms of giving up equity in the beginning?
To employees or to?
Or to an angel fund, or there must be some kind of norm. If you're raising X, did you give up 10%, 20%?
So.
Did you give up more?
We have a lot of books. We have a lot of resources on our website. So a lot of it is directed toward the angel investing side. There's one called Winning Angels, which I think if you want to understand it from our perspective, is a good one to read. So there are a lot of resources there. So, we're in a kind of an interesting market right now, but, the standard priced situation for an early round is something like, 25% to 40%, something in that range. You kind of think of it almost like a third, not really, because you're not going to give employees a third, but, something like that employees have some, founders have some, investors have some, and there's alignment of interest. So we're always at each deal, we're really looking at, is this a company that works? Does the founder have enough? If we take in more money, are they motivated? And are they still an entrepreneur? We are your partner. The kind of investing we're doing early stage, we're joining you as a partner. You are not our employee. We will go on the board, et cetera, but we need an entrepreneurial mindset in the company. So that's what we strive to create. There are lots of other ways these things can get structured, sometimes with notes, and there's a lot of stuff floating around in the system right now. But it's actually very important for angels who are that first money or these early stage investors to go in pretty low, get a material ownership, because we do expect possibly follow-on rounds and more dilution, et cetera. And we really and truly are looking for very large addressable markets. We're not kidding when we say this. We're looking for $500 to $1 billion addressable markets when we invest, and that's why these little numbers get really, really big. In terms of what, and again, I'll give you a quick example there. Most angel exits are in more like the 20 to 80 million range. There are a lot of exits happen around 20 million. The $1 billion Instagram, that's not the norm. The norm is much, much smaller than that. And so the deal has to work at these smaller numbers. But even let's say we had a really great upside case, and maybe we thought we were going to sell your company to somebody for $100 million. Well, if they're going to pay $100 million for your company, then what are they going to do? Well, they're probably going to need to triple it or quadruple it or something to get a return on their investment. So they would have to take this $100 million purchase price and feel that they could grow it to maybe $200, $300, $400 million of value. That's why it has to be $1 billion addressable market. Because if, let's say they grow it to $400 million, that's 40% market share of that market. So we really mean it when we talk about this. It's 40% market share. It's a lot of market share, and that's kind of an extreme example. That's what's going on here. These have to be, for us, we're taking in money, these have to be big ideas. We both have to really think it's a big idea, even to get somebody to pay $20 to $100 million for it. It still has to be a big idea.
That's a great point to leave at. I'd love for you to give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. I think we'll have 15 minutes of networking, and if you guys have any specific questions for any of us, feel free to ask, and thank you so much.